Thanks for joining me on Beyond the Water Cooler. This is where we have the conversations that matter about putting the human factor back into business. Why? Because we know that when we get people right, we get business right. My guests are awesome people who know about all things leadership, engagement, mental wellbeing, and high performance. This is a space to listen, reflect on your own practice, and learn how to create an even better experience. I'm your host, Lisa, psychologist and psychotherapist and founder of It's Time for Change. Let's dive in. I'm trading places and I'm bringing to you a podcast where I was the guest so that you can hear more of my views and expertise on different subjects. These conversations are all about dealing with challenges and questions that consume headspace, whether that's knowing how best to support people, reduce overwhelm, or develop better ways of working. I'm here to help you work out how to do things differently, ultimately increasing employee happiness and outcomes.
Good afternoon if you're in South Africa. Good morning if you're in the UK, or potentially at some other time in a different part of the world. It is great to be here with you today, where we're going to be looking today at this question of organizational effectiveness. I have a friend and colleague, I guess, of sorts from the UK who's going to be joining us. Her name is Lisa Lloyd. And before I get her onto the screen, let me just introduce you. I met Lisa, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago when I was part of a podcast that she runs called Beyond the Water Cooler. But her practice, her business is called It's Time for Change. And she works mostly as a psychologist she's a psychologist and a psychotherapist, but she works, I think, mostly in the corporate space with leadership, doing a lot of leadership work and development, with a focus on mental health and emotional development, which of course is very much close to our heart here at Mygrow, because we are the EQ people. That's what we do. And I think that was part of the resonance as to why we connected what feels like a long time ago, and why we've been following each other ever since. So she has a lot of the same values, a lot of the same focus as what we have here at Mygrow, working with organizational culture, with leaders, etc. And her podcast is, I'll let her speak more about the podcast when she comes on, but it's essentially looking at how do we build this human-centered experience at work, where we take our conversation, we take our relationships beyond the general kind of water cooler caliber of relationship in the workplace. So without further ado, let me bring Lisa on stage. Lisa, welcome.
That's a very good introduction. So 10 out of 10 for introducing me.
Yeah. Okay. What would you have added if that I may have left out?
I think it's really interesting when you're saying about I work with organizations and focus a lot on mental health. I think I have really pivoted over the last 10 years from kind of working very much in the mental health space in companies to working much more with the culture, which obviously good mental health should be a product. So I've kind of switched quite a lot. And I think it's really interesting when people hear Lisa, psychologist, mental health, and they immediately go into that, well, she must be sitting down doing one-to-one assessments. And I'm like, nope, not my bag. So I like the big picture stuff, because then we get that right. We get the people right in terms of their mental health and well-being.
Now, obviously, there's an overlap. I mean, this is the space that we work in a lot as well. And I think what you are maybe speaking to or referring to is sometimes a misunderstanding of just the power and the realm of psychology in a collective experience. And I know what we've seen a lot of the time when we deal with clients or people who are interested in looking at what we might be able to add to the mix, is that they don't think of well-being as something that is connected to culture. They don't think of mental health as something connected to culture. But I have been encouraged to see more and more not more and more, but I have seen more and more in your posts on LinkedIn and different things you put out, your podcast, etc., that you're saying, let's look at culture as a really important aspect of what it is that creates or hinders or harms or helps mental health for individuals. Is there anything there that you could speak to quickly before we dive into the actual topic?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think there's been a massive shift towards kind of realizing we need to focus on getting, looking after people's mental health and well-being. And I think people have done that by doing the only thing they know, which is what's being marketed really well and what can I grab hold of and shove into our organization to make a difference to mental health and well-being. But in actual fact, that feels like people are grabbing initiatives, perhaps the ones that have been marketed really well, and they're not necessarily measuring impact. And it means the workplace is getting busier and is noisier in terms of all these initiatives, which are supposed to be helping people's mental health and well-being. And I think it's much more helpful when we strip back all that noise and we go back to actually what's really impacting day to day on our mental health and well-being, which is actually doing less and working out what we're doing, and if it's making an impact or not. And if it's not, get rid of it and keep the stuff that is making a really positive difference.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and of course that's not just an individual. It's not just the impact on an individual. It really does come back to how the team, how the group, how the company operates. So I'm going to move us back onto our topic for the day, which is organizational effectiveness. Now, I suspect that many in this webinar today or listening to this podcast later are people who have a grasp of what organizational effectiveness is. Maybe you're in the OD department or you're working with organizational development. But for those who aren't as familiar with the term, there's many definitions. And in a second, Lisa, I'm going to ask you what your definition is for this. But basically, it seems that as a general consensus, organizational effectiveness is essentially talking about how good is the company at hitting its goals. Is it able to actually be effective in what it wants to accomplish, what it wants to achieve? And there's many different models. There's a goal model, which is even implicit here in this working definition. Are we using our resources well at the models? We'll dive heavily into that. Is our strategy working? The stakeholder, there's all sorts of different models. When I was doing some prep for this, I came across this little bit more, I guess, of a robust definition from this Institute of Organization Effectiveness, where they say that OE, or organizational effectiveness, is a measure of how well an organization utilizes its resources, structures, processes to engage its employees and adapt to its environment to achieve optimal performance and the desired results. Is there anything, you work a lot in this space with organizations, is there anything that either of these two definitions is leaving out, or that you would like to say, well, I think we should include this, or I think this isn't as important, and this is the thing that it really should be? Or maybe to phrase the question another way, what's your working definition of organizational?
I really like this one. And I think the crux of it for me is around how well people are actually evaluating their practice in terms of how they know if it's effective or not. And that goes back to a step before that, which is, what does effective look like? So people are always striving to be more effective and, having these goals and so on, but they're not necessarily shared. They're not necessarily well understood. So actually, when we are talking, I'm a real fan of having great conversations, which are, what does effective practice actually look like? And whether you do that in teams or whole organization. But when we are crystal clear about what effectiveness means to us, which will be different from one team to another, one organization to another, when we are really clear about that, then we can look at, okay, how do we achieve that? And how do we measure that? So those are the bits. It sounds really simple when you look at a definition like this, but actually in terms of how well people do it, there's a kind of marked difference between these words and a lot of practice we see.
Yeah. Okay. So then this brings me to my question for you around your work in particular. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying it's all very good and well to have a nice definition like this, but actually this is hard. This is hard to actually get this right. And just getting it right on paper, that doesn't mean you've got it right. And I guess that's where your clients are bringing you in to ask for your help. Normally, on your podcast, you're the one doing the interviewing. You are asking the questions, and I'm going to put you in the hot seat here. I want you to tell us about your work and what it is that, how it is you take it from being on paper to actually figuring out, how do we make sure this is working?
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time with teams rather than kind of going in and saying, right, you need to do it like this. Here's a program. Here's a kind of set way of doing it. It's like, let's just go back to basics in terms of establishing what we think good practice looks like for us. And I think a lot of time teams haven't really given that thought. Teams don't really often think about what their role is as a team. So it's like my role in a company might be I'm in charge of sales or whatever my specific role title is, but people aren't clear about what that means as how do we operate as a team? What does that mean? What are the behaviors associated with that role? And when I work a lot with leadership teams, they end up getting the title of a leader. And it's like, right, we're now part of the leadership team, but they don't think about how they function as a team, what leadership really means, and all the behaviors associated with that. So having an opportunity to look at what good looks like for them, and that's about aligning with their values and being very clear about what the people need of them. So what does that look like? And then what is enabling that and what's blocking that? And it's amazing when you have to create the space to have these conversations, people come up with so much intelligence in this space. They don't need complicated tools and processes and stuff. They just need, for me, it's about having a space to sit down and say, actually, this is what we're trying to do. And this is the stuff that gets in the way for me or for us. And then you look at that, and that's what I mean by stripping back the system. So looking at practice that's happening now, and that's where I spend. And then whatever comes out of that, it might be someone saying, well, actually, I know we need to be more compassionate as leaders. We know that being human-centered is really important, but I don't have the confidence in how to develop, I don't have the skills I need in terms of having compassionate conversations and doing check-ins and knowing how to inspire and how to lead people through change and stuff. And then you identify, what needs to happen next. So it's kind of starting with conversations about really unpicking what's going on.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I were chatting before when we were connecting around this, and we were just talking about the shifting landscape of what's happening. So if those leaders I can imagine these leaders in conversation with you in a session, and you're asking them, do you know what's required? Do you know? And they say, yeah, sort of. We sort of know compassion. We need compassion. But there is a history, there is a ballast, there's a backlog of leadership looks like this, which, yes, we're seeing it's shifting, but at the same time, there is a history, there is a set of prior understandings. Maybe for older people in the workplace, they have a whole career of memory of how their leaders behaved. The command and control kind of perspective, which we're seeing shifting. I'd love to know your perspective on the shift that we're seeing in terms of what does leadership actually look like, or what does the future world of leadership require?
It's a really good question. So I see some, and luckily fewer, some leaders who are very much stuck in that command and control, because that's the only way they've always known how to lead. And they don't really have the confidence or know how to do something different, or they don't see the point of it. There are luckily a lot of leaders who are now understanding that there needs to be a shift. There's loads of research around showing that actually the workforce, HR are asking and saying that we need leaders who are much more compassionate, who are much more focused on looking after the team as humans rather than sort of task focused. But we know that most managers and leaders have not been developed in that space. There's a real kind of mismatch. And I think the leaders, when I'm working with leaders, time again, they recognize that their practice isn't doing what it needs to be. They recognize that their practice is quite traditional, but they feel that they are stuck in the weeds of doing kind of all the task stuff. They can't get out high enough to look at the big picture. They don't necessarily have the skills to be able to have the conversations, and they worry about showing themselves up. I've spoke to a MD last week who was talking about, I don't want to be seen as being weak because I don't know the answers of what's happening next, where we're going. It's changing so quickly, and I don't feel in control of it. And we've been having these conversations about, you don't need to be in control. You need to say, this is where we've got to be going. As a collective team, how do we think is the best way of getting there? Because for
Yes.
this individual, he's like, I'm spending more and more of my time in this space over here, trying to do forecasting and trying to do this. That's not my skill set. I don't know how to do this. So as soon as he has the conversation with his team, someone else said, I love that stuff. And they stepped in and said, I'll help you with that. He's like, whoa. Yeah. But he felt that as a leader, he was supposed to know everything, be better, like be the most skilled. And I was like, no, you're the person who kind of sets the direction. You're almost like a conductor in orchestra. You've got all these brilliant people who are brilliant at what they do. And you're about creating space to say, do we know where we're going? Do we know how we're getting there? Do we know how we're supporting each other? What's getting in the way? And creating that kind of space. But the fear of gets in the way for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's the shift of a more traditional leadership perspective being, I need to make sure the team wins, or I need to make sure that we win. And a shift towards, I need to make sure that we as the team win. And how do we win? How do we win? You know, and then to broker that and foster that, to be able to really unlock the team, instead of being the one who brings the solution, being the one who facilitates the conversation.
And of course, you're empowering them, aren't you, when you're doing that? Yeah.
And you're elevating their own sense of contribution and value. We actually got a great poll around this in terms of the human behaviors, the leadership behaviors. Do we understand what's required? So we're going to bring that up now onto, onto the screen, onto the stage. And when it arrives, we'd love you guys who are watching to vote, to answer, to give us your perspectives on what is your experience of this question. Do you yourself, as a leader, do you feel that you're able to engage with the leadership behaviors that are required of you, so that you can lead towards a future which is more human-focused, human-centered? This will be a live poll that gives us results as you answer. So as soon as we start seeing some traction here, we'll be able to get a sense of, those of you who are here, how you are feeling. Are you feeling confident so far? Yes, 100%. Let's give it a second and see.
But you know what? It's such a good question in terms of even asking this poll, or putting this poll out there now, Theran, because some people just get nervous about even admitting on this that they don't know. They think it's a sign of weakness, or they don't know how, or it's like, maybe someone's going to know that it was me that answered that poll question.
Yes. Yeah. And just to put your minds at rest, we won't know. So far, we're looking like 22% of the people who have answered are saying, no, I don't feel confident to engage or comfortable to engage because I don't know what those behaviors are. 70% right now saying, yes, I am comfortable. I am able to engage. Someone saying, nope, I don't know that I have the confidence, 7%. At this point, we don't have any answers to the top categories of well, not the top, but the first questions on this, the first answers on this list.
Which is good.
You know, I don't think it's necessary. Gladly, I'm
glad.
That's
good. That's good. That's reassuring. But I think also the one that says yes, I think so. What's also interesting, and I've seen some companies use some research, some surveys, where they are asking the leadership teams set of questions, and they're asking the employees a set of questions, and the leaders go, yeah, we're great, we are doing this stuff really well, we're kind of being everything we need to be for our teams. And then you ask the employees, and they're like, no, I'm not getting
it's a disconnect.
So it's a disconnect. So actually, we need to make sure that if people are confident that they are engaging in these behaviors, that they are basing that on data and not their beliefs and their assumptions. Because if we don't check that out, it's a very common misconception that we are better than we are. So the data is really important.
I can't remember because I'm remembering off the cuff now, but so I won't get the details 100% correct. But I saw a Gallup survey, the results of a Gallup survey/poll towards the end of last year, which was essentially looking at this exact same dynamic of leaders thinking they are leading well. What percentage of leaders who they themselves think they are leading well, what percentage of their people agree with that, which is fascinating, which revealed a bit of a blind spot around leadership effectiveness. One thing I would love to, we've given this a bit of time to settle now. There don't seem to be too many more votes coming through. And the stats as we see it right now are that 25% of our audience, in answer to the question, do you feel able to engage with the leadership behaviors that are required of you to be more human-centered? A quarter of our audience here is saying no, because I don't know what those behaviors are. And I think I'm going to pull this poll off the screen for now, but let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. Maybe do you have an initial response to that? What are the behaviors?
Yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me, that stat, because I think, go back to my earlier point, most people end up with a leadership role and they see it as a role and they don't understand the behaviors that come with that. So, which is where I spend a lot of time with people exploring, okay, what does it mean to be a good leader? And we know that the data now is showing that it's less about being a task focused, and it's much more about creating space for people to be able to voice challenges. So when I'm trying to do something and it's not working as well as I want it to be able to voice that, so we can problem solve, just come up with new ideas, to be given permission to try new things and to fail. So people, unless you are very explicit about creating an environment where this all centers around psychological safety, where people can see a potential opportunity and think, well, it'd be really interesting if we could play around with that a little bit and try something new, which is necessary, because otherwise we just stay where we are. We don't change our practice. But we need to know that leaders have our back, and if we try something, we are trying it for obviously a good reason. If it doesn't work, it's not a sense of failure, it's a sense of, well, it's a good idea, why did it not work, what can we take from that, because there might be something useful. But it's about creating the right environment for people to feel safe and to feel heard and to feel human. So if you're turning up at work one day and you are not in the right place because you've got some family issue going on, or your head is all over the place, to actually know that you can say that, you can own that feeling and just say, I'm just not having a good day today. And for that to be heard and understood, and there to be some empathy. So that kind of comes back to that compassionate leadership. It's treating each other as humans, rather than you're here, you're supposed to be working this number of set hours, you're supposed to be doing
check your baggage at the door, be professional now.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, they don't have the confidence of stepping into that space because they either don't feel that they've got permission from their seniors to be able to say, actually, you know what, just don't work for the next hour, just go for a long walk, or go and make the phone call you need to make to sort an issue out. Or people are worried about, if I step into that space of having a conversation, I've got to solve it, I've got to help this person, and I might not know about it. And that's a real fear factor for a lot of people. And one of my things I just keep emphasizing is not about answering or solving problems. It's about enabling someone to feel heard. So when you're checking in with someone, don't just go, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm okay, great. Now let's crack on with the real business. Let's talk about, right, how are you really doing? Like, what's going well for you right now? What's getting in the way of you feeling brilliant? And what can I do to help? Or not, you're not having to come up with the answers, but so many leaders and so many managers worry about stepping into that space of really checking with people because it's going to open a can of worms and I don't know what to say. Just listen, just hear this person, summarize what they're saying, just show empathy. And I say just show empathy. Some people struggle with that. So again, that might be something that people need to develop. But again, people can develop that. So that really kind of that being human bit are the behaviors that we need to really turn the volume up on.
One of the ways we encourage creating that space is to model that. Actually, vulnerability from leadership is a way, if I can show through my own vulnerability, listen, my life is just manic and it's crazy and I'm struggling with this and that and that. As soon as we can lead that, we normalize it for the team. So the behavior of vulnerability is a behavior that unlocks the safety and allows them to be human as well.
Such a good point. And I was having that exact conversation with some directors yesterday who are doing some group coaching, and we were talking about the fact that the most senior people in that room, because we were talking about the fact that they can have mixed people, mixed roles. The most senior people in the room need to start the conversation first, and
Yes.
they need to be very honest and very vulnerable. And when I've seen people do that, it's so powerful, because when you've got the most senior person in that room starting a conversation by doing a check-in, saying, I'm feeling on my knees right now, or I'm just feeling really overwhelmed right now, or I'm just feeling like stuck. And actually people go, wow, I've never heard this person talk so openly or honestly. I've never seen them take their mask off of I'm in control, I'm fine. And suddenly you've got a safe environment to do that. But of course that takes a conscious space to be created, those listening skills. It kind of comes back to emotional intelligence. You'll know about that, Theran, from your work.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I always want to just jump in the whole way through the conversation. I'm like, EQ, will do.
Yes. What are you seeing in that space?
Well, what we're seeing, and before I get there, maybe I'll just cut slightly back to what you were saying a minute ago about control. You were saying, the leader is scared to go there because that means I might unearth something that I can't control. If we do this, I need to be able to control it, which is it betrays the leadership paradigm that we're bringing to that. Instead of I'm just going to be here with you.
Yeah.
Which is the same reason why we don't want to share as leaders. We don't want to share vulnerably, because I don't know what's going to happen with that. I can't control that environment. So that first step of vulnerability, it opens up a second context where, again, you need to be willing and able to say, I don't need to control this. We don't need to figure this out. Now, to get there, you really do have to have a very strong self-perception. You need to have the EQ skills, self-regard, all the different aspects of self-perception as a sort of key skill set. You have to have a strong internal psychological identity, which again plays into EQ skills, for that to really come out as self-expression, which is another whole subset of EQ skills, in a way that doesn't undermine the safety of the moment. I think, and what we see, to answer your question more directly, around what we see in the EQ space, is that when you build these skills, they result in the behaviors, the human-centered behaviors. One of my kind of like, I don't know, my mottos for life is this phrase that I can't remember if I still have it on my LinkedIn, but I had it as my tagline on LinkedIn, which is humanize capitalism, which really does speak to this. How do we build psychological core strength and a good psychological emotional foundation so that we can lead as human beings in a capitalist context, which comes with a whole lot of baggage. And I think when we do that, and then again as leaders, when we lead the way in building those competencies, building those skills, we normalize that kind of growth for others. Because in the EQ space, to really build these skills, you have to do the work of changing your paradigms, rewiring actual physiological realities inside your brain. Your mind is the outworking of what's going on physiologically at the brain level.
Yeah.
And when you build those, you normalize growth. You don't just normalize vulnerability, like we were saying earlier, but you normalize growth. And if you can normalize growth, then the rest of the team doesn't have to pretend that they've arrived, that they have it all together, that they know exactly what it means to be a professional, and it actually unlocks for them that psychologically safe environment where they can be vulnerable, or they can admit they don't know. I mean, what we often hear from people is when you build the cultural realities around these kinds of ways of working, like we're sharing now, what begins to happen is people don't just lower the masks of I've got it all together, but they lower the masks of I don't know how to do this. Maybe I'm not the right person for this. And the team will go, no, you're the right person. I can help you with this, or whatever it is. And unfortunately, in so much of what we have in the world of work, the world of business, we don't feel we can actually be human first or person first.
And I think that is leading to a bit of a crisis around people feeling very isolated. So, you know, I talk a lot about people being quite lonely, and people kind of associate that with being old people who are living on their own. And I was like, actually, you can have people in all kind of remote working, so people are stuck at home. Actually, the evidence now is showing that people can be in a really busy environment. You can be surrounded by people and feel incredibly lonely, incredibly isolated, because you don't have proper connections with them. And people get really confused. It's a bit like social media. It's like, I've got all these likes, or these people are around me, so therefore I'm well liked and I feel a sense of belonging. It couldn't be further from the truth. If you have real connection, and this is where, again, going back to the importance of what leaders need to be doing in terms of their behaviors, is around creating opportunities for true connection and collaboration, so that people aren't feeling stuck on their own. And I think the more senior people get in an organization, people tend to think, well, they're really successful, they're really well connected. Actually, it can get lonelier because people feel that they have all that burden on their shoulders and they don't have anyone to kind of really be themselves with. They've got to be seen to be this person who is not offloading to other people. And it's trying to encourage people to challenge those assumptions and to be a bit more vulnerable and to be more open and to really build those connections. There's the Gallup workforce survey last year. I can't remember what the proper title is of it, but they showed that I think 1 in 5 employees across the world had reported that they were lonely the day before. And you just think 1 in 5 is staggering. It just shows there's a real problem here with if we're feeling lonely, we don't feel we've got a sense of belonging, our basic emotional needs are not being met, and we don't feel that we can go and talk to people about, I don't know about this, or can you help me with that? And of course, then it's going to affect our mental health and well-being, and it's going to affect our performance. So ultimately, this connection stuff is really important for an organization to be successful.
Yeah. That's actually something a few minutes ago, I was thinking, I'd love to speak about this, the collective benefit of this. And so this is a great segue for me to jump into it. Okay. What we've often seen is that we often talk about EQ is the individual subconscious. It's what comes out of the individual subconscious is the way we show up in the world. But when we can go on a journey together of growing emotional intelligence and emotional maturity with a group, something happens at a collective level, which we would say is the collective subconscious, which is culture. And actually, I think this is one of the perhaps subconsciously the subconscious myth that we have, that individuals are powerful. And yes, see how we got there, and that individuals perform and individuals contribute. And yes, that's true, but it is the collective. It really is a collective intelligence. It is collective performance. That's where the beauty comes, because people fit into a context that is operating and affecting, that is operating effectively and is able to hit its goals. So to that story you were sharing earlier around that MD who was, or GM or director or someone who was saying, I've got in my mind that I have to be good at all these things and I can't do them. Well, if you're able to bring that out into a context and someone says, oh, that's my superpower, let me jump in, it actually allows the group to be able to be way more effective. So the organization to be way more effective than if you just try and optimize individual effectiveness. It's that collective intelligence. The whole field of collective intelligence is looking at this. How do we get more? It's another English word would be synergy. How do we get that 1 + 1 = 3 or 5 or whatever comes out of it? There was another idea I had, and I'd love to run it past you to just get your sense on it. But the construct of employee recognition, I think it's time for a reboot. I think employee recognition should be recognizing the human. It's not just you've done a good job as an individual and we're going to recognize that in front of everyone. That's powerful, that's valuable, it's important. But if we can recognize the employees, if we can actually understand, that means understanding what's going on with them, understanding why they're struggling in the context they're in. Maybe it's emotional, maybe it's just structural, maybe it's just to do with we don't know what's required of us, or we've been given a mandate and things aren't working and I don't know how to engage in this context. If we can recognize that, not just the performance, but recognize what's hindering, what's hampering, that's when we really begin to get this collective effervescence or this collective intelligence that comes out. What's your experience been around how do we help to create a context where we can recognize that? I remember chatting with you a bit about communication, and I know conversation is really important for you. So here's the microphone. Speak.
Yeah. So I think kind of creating that space to recognize what individuals bring. I think going back to the point about performance, so many people are measured on individual performance, and it's about, have you reached this target or whatever. I think when people take a step back and go, right, let's look at recognizing this group of people for everything that they bring, and rather than trying to put a kind of measure on each person in terms of their role, just say collectively, you need to achieve X, Y, or Z. And how do each of you contribute to that? And then how do we recognize that? And so some of that's about behavior. So if someone's having a bit of a hard time in that team and someone else is stepping in and supporting that person, and giving them some space and using their emotional intelligence and checking in with them and so on, that is really, really valuable. And that's a behavior that should be recognized as well. And one of the conversations I've had quite a lot recently with different companies is we have billable hours. We don't have time to do that. So they're being measured on, they're looking at the billable hours. And it's like, where's the recognition for someone being able to take the time out to say, actually, this is how I'm doing right now, and this is what I need. I know I need this stuff to be able to do even better because I'm struggling here and I need something over here. Where do they have the time space to be able to do that? And where do people have the time space to be able to meet those needs? And I speak to so many managers and leaders who are saying, we know that we need to do more in the people space, but we are not being recognized for that. We're only being measured and recognized for something which is entirely about numbers. So there's got to be a bit of a reset, a rethink in terms of what are the behaviors that we think are really important in our organization for it to be effective. And when we recognize that that's around making sure that people are feeling okay about doing their job. You raised a really good point about, do people have clarity about what that even looks like? Because again, times I hear people saying, well, they're not performing really well, or they're not kind of hitting the mark on that, or they haven't done X, Y, Z very much recently. And it's like, do they know what is expected of them? Do they know what good looks like? And again, it goes back to that clarity. If they know that and they know the behaviors that are involved and they're recognized for those behaviors or for developing those behaviors if they don't have them, then it changes everything in terms of creating a culture where people are stepping into that space and being engaged in a much more meaningful way, rather than everyone going back into kind of silo mode, which is I've got to hit my target, otherwise I don't get any recognition at all.
Yes, and if someone else is going to get recognized, I better make sure they don't get recognized twice before I get recognized once. So it breeds that kind of anxious competitiveness.
Yes, yeah.
We've got a couple of other polls we could put up. Are there any that we have here that you think would be beneficial? We are also going to need to take a slight ad break in a second, where I just want to play a video around a bit of a case study around how building EQ competencies unlocks so much of what we've been sharing on this chat already. So we can either do that now, or else we can go to a poll. I'll let you choose.
We have a the bit about conversations and making space and being authentic, being vulnerable in that space. There's a poll question about, do people have crystal clarity about what the people need from them? I think that'd be a really good poll question to put up, because it's such a simple question. So when people say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to have, how to start a conversation, or, actually just being able to ask the question, what do you need of me? What can I
Yeah.
do to be most helpful to you? What can I do to enable you to be most effective, or to feel good at work? What do you need of me? That's where you get, that's like a golden question, because it changes the whole kind of narrative from this leader as manager is the expert, they know what they're doing, and they rock up and do it and just hope it's the right fit, to actually, I'm here to kind of serve you guys as my team. What do you need from me? And actually that will be as a collective, and that will also be individually, because within that team you might have some people who want a lot of checking in, a lot of sort of touching base, and some people want a lot more space. But it's about being what other people need of you.
Yeah. And of course, if you're watching, please feel free to go ahead and answer at this point. And I suspect that what we will begin to see here, Lisa, as these answers come through, will be a little bit of a dipstick in terms of getting a sense of how good is the communication, and how good is that culture, or what is the, should I say, the temperature of the culture around am I allowed to be human, actually engage and ask and understand what it is people require of me. So yeah, as we wait for a couple of these answers to come through,
because I have a good idea, and it goes back to that assumptions. Like, some people say, well, it's really obvious, you know, I'm an accountant, it's really obvious what people need of me. Like, okay, but that's in terms of the role bit. So you might know that you've got to provide, you know, whatever spreadsheets, whatever data, but what else do people need of you? What do they need of you in terms of you being a human being as well? And actually, goes back to the disconnect around people thinking that they're being what they need to be, and other people saying they're not. So being very clear, asking that question and making sure that what you're hearing back is what you're providing.
Yes. I'm wondering if something may have gone wrong here, Lisa, with our poll. I can see it here, but nobody's voting. So
I can on screen 16%, 18%. I have a good idea.
Are you able to see that? That's interesting. I'm on 000 on my side. Okay, so there are some answers coming through. Good to hear. Do you want to speak to what you're seeing? Because I'm just seeing zeros.
Well, I can only see one number, because I can't see the whole poll on my screen, which is I have a good idea, and that's that 16% number I can see. And I think for that's great that people have a good idea. Yeah. Check that is data-led view rather than assumption. And I think just being, there's a question there about, yes, because I've been told what's required in my role. Again, there's a difference between kind of the role and the behavior. So what behaviors are they wanting to see? And sometimes the people above you won't necessarily be very clear about, or they don't care actually how you deliver the results. So it's up to you to think, do I just try and deliver that result by command and control, sticking my head down and hoping for the best, or just telling people what they need to go and do? Or do I empower my team, going back to your point earlier, Theran, about I'm going to empower people. It's also great for succession planning. Someone said on the chat, 83% say yes because I've asked people what they need of me. Fantastic. That's really good.
I just saw that number. A colleague brought her laptop over. You may have seen me looking up there. She was showing me. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing anything on this poll.
Know, but those 83% deserve a gold star, because that's
83%. Really, that's encouraging. It's exciting.
Yeah, really good, really good.
And specifically, I guess the way this answer is worded, because I've asked people what they need of me, there's something in there as well. It's because I have had the assertiveness, which is an EQ skill that we deal with. I have had the self-regard to be able, I've had the empathy even to be able to go and say, what do you need of me?
I value you. I'm making time to ask because I want to be helpful to you.
Yeah. Okay. Very exciting. I didn't expect it to be quite so high as that. I would have thought it would have been more along the lines of feeling disempowered or not understanding. And I didn't get a read on the second last answer here, because I've been told what is required of me. I think I remember that being fairly low, which is interesting. If we're in a position of leadership and we're saying nobody's telling us what they require, Or what does that mean about the culture of our leadership that the team doesn't feel they can come and share with us, that they require something? So perhaps something to think through there as you guys are watching. We've got 10 minutes left, Lisa. Let's take some questions from the viewers, from the listeners. There's a number that have come through. My colleague has picked some for us and made them public for us to connect with. So let's just look at this first one. An observation more than a question. We here in the States are having something of an anti-empathy movement. Anti-empathy movement. Transactional leadership is tapping into something in culture that values efficient completion of tasks and devalues effectiveness. Efficient over effective. Very interesting. Are you seeing anything like this, a sort of cultural trend in your neck of the woods, Lisa?
No, not so much. I think it's really interesting. I've had a couple of questions or conversations rather with some directors who have one on a director's board. They'll have maybe one in the minority seat who's saying a bit like that. We just need to be really efficient. We don't need to do all this soft stuff. And actually, but there's a real movement. The majority are realizing that it's not working, and the workforce are asking for a different type of leadership and a different type of culture, and people are voting with their feet, or they're staying put because if they don't have other options, but they are quietly just under the radar and not performing very well. So
quiet quitting, to use a term from a few years ago.
So I think I've had lots of conversations with people about how to try and change those people's perceptions in terms of it's not just about efficiency, and when we talk about efficiency, people think that by pushing people harder and just by focusing on the task, we can make them perform well. But we know there's a huge difference. I mean, a topic we haven't even talked about today. There's a huge difference between stress and being stretched. And when people are feeling stretched, they perform really well. They can be really efficient. When people are feeling stressed, it pulls down performance, and it increases the number of mistakes. Decision making goes out the window as a whole. That's another conversation we have about how we make good decisions. But some people are adamant they don't want to step away from just efficient working in a more traditional way. And we say, well, if you refuse to move, just wait and see, play it out as an experiment and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, what I find interesting, and far be it from me as a South African all the way down on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean to give too much cultural critique or assume that I can add cultural insight into the North American context. But at least from this side, as we look, it seems that there is a huge bifurcation that is happening. The camps are becoming more and more binary or polarized. And of course, that's been a conversation in politics for years, this bipartisanship. But at least from where I'm sitting down here in sunny Cape Town, having a look at how the nature of the conversation has progressed, I would, for me, that becomes a primary lens through which I say, okay, yeah, that's why there's perhaps this anti-empathy direction that might be coming out in the culture at work, even because everything has an impact downstream somewhere. And I know with some of our North American colleagues that we have, some of the guys who are running with Mygrow North America, they are seeing more and more that there is a huge need for some kind of organizational intervention that helps people understand how to disagree well. How do we disagree well and be able to, the old classic thing is don't talk about, religion, politics, and something, I forget the third one, at the dinner table, because it is so divisive. And even here at the Mygrow lunch table, if we even get into talking North American politics, there's drastically different views. And there's almost, I can't afford to be empathetic because I'm not going to give any ground here. And maybe that's playing out in terms of just be efficient. Just don't bring your stuff. We're not going to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think it's a real skill in terms of working with people to know how to have healthy conflict. and not to shy away from it. And we talk about, having challenging conversations all the time. Radical candor is a great one in terms of, we need to say what needs to be said in a work environment, and there are certain things we need to say and people shy away from because it feels a bit uncomfortable, but we need to say it showing empathy, because otherwise it comes across as being really cold and too direct. But also this empathy bit does not mean, and I had a conversation with some people yesterday, he said, we've gone too far the other way. We are now, there's a fear of actually anyone making any decisions that are right for the business, because we are so much in that empathy space that we just, that's being interpreted as whatever someone wants, they can have. It's like, no, you've got to have expectations around what is the right practice here. It goes back to being very clear about your expectations, about what it means to work here, what we expect of you, what good looks like, and where you've got space to play around with that. But it doesn't mean, empathy doesn't mean do what you like, because I don't want to say anything that might upset you. And I think there's some people taking that to the extreme.
And again, just to wrap up this one, there has been a culture of, I'm not going to speak out. It's too dangerous to speak out, so I'll just accept whatever you have to say. And now in North America, there's I'm going to say what I think. So there's this, and again, to bring it back to EQ competencies, empathy is the one, but you've got to balance that with assertiveness, with are you able to engage in a way that is healthy for both and that has boundaries. I'm going to move us on to another very practical question here from Stefan. I think I'm saying that right. If you had just 2 questions to ask employees to gauge the health of the organization, what would it be? I'm going to throw this squarely into yours. We've got a couple of minutes left. What would your 2 questions be for them, Lisa?
My 2 questions would be, well, one of them would definitely be what do you need of me in terms of how I'm working with you? So what can I do to help you? The other one would be, where are you on the stress curve in terms of, are you in the optimal zone of being able to perform well because you're feeling really good, where you're being stretched, or are you in the stress zone, or are you actually in the bored zone because your job just isn't meaningful and purposeful? And find out where someone's at, and then make sure that'll give you the intel you need to be able to help that person move back into the zone of optimal performance where they're being stretched, if they're not there already.
And then I guess the answer to these 2 questions would be, it would almost be, you'd need to interpret to gauge the health of the organization as per the questionnaire. Okay, there's 2 other questions here. I think we may have time for just the one. There's one, I think it's public. I think everyone can see it. This question of how do we rebuild trust? Oh, I'd love to get into that. I don't think we're going to have time. And I think I'm going to take this next one to the stage instead, this one about virtual teams. Have you found that successful organizational development is different? I think this is a huge question, and only as the years have progressed since COVID are we perhaps beginning to get a sense of that. I remember after COVID for a long time, I was like, I don't know how to think about digital culture. I'm a big culture guy, but I don't know about digital. I don't know about virtual culture. I would love to hear your perspective on this question, Lisa.
So just clarifying the question, because I can't see it all on the screen. So this is about if it's different for hybrid or remote workers.
Sorry, let me read the question. I'm curious, have you found that successful organizational development is very different / more difficult for virtual teams?
Okay, so in terms of yes, it's different. I think a lot more time and intention has to be put into how to make sure we are connecting with each other, and how to make sure that everything we talked about today can absolutely happen. So it's not that it can't happen, but we need to make sure that we are creating space where people come together, however that come together is, whether it's physical or on screen. But being able to have a space where people are still doing all their check-in and finding out how to support each other and role modeling all the behaviors that are needed and so on. So it's absolutely possible, but I think sometimes people have to work a little bit harder at it, because it's finding the right platform that everyone feels happy for that to happen and can engage with it.
Lisa, I'm going to quickly just share a couple of resources before we run out of time. 2 of them from Mygrow, 1 of them from you. The shift between an old kind of way of managing and a new kind of way of leading is part of what we've discussed today. We have a great ebook that we want to make available. You can either use this QR code now on the screen, or else you can get the link, which is being put into the chat, or else you can catch it on the email that's going to follow. An incredible resource that we've been using for the last couple of years here at Mygrow around how do you transition in your own leadership from management thinking to leadership. So go ahead and QR code scan that now. The next one I'd love to share is just a leadership development strategy audit that we offer here at Mygrow. Sorry, I'm showing you all my icons there, which again is a very helpful process. If you'd like to book a meeting with us to talk about what is your leadership development process that you are currently running in your organization, are there any gaps? Are you applying a holistic framework around what needs to be developed to be able to get leaders who can lead into the future with some of the shifts that have happened and that are coming? And then lastly, just to say, this is very much the space that Lisa plays in. If you're in the UK, even I'm sure if you are somewhere else in the world, Lisa works with teams to be able to create this kind of organizational effectiveness. This QR code will take you straight to the contact page on her website, and as well you can check in the chat pane for that link. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today with us. We are at the end of our time, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. We'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you. What have you taken from that conversation to think about or do differently? How has that inspired you to develop practice to bring out the best in people, including yourself? This podcast gets more listeners when people like you give a thumbs up on Apple or wherever you listen, and especially if you leave a short review. So please help be part of the movement towards creating workplaces that really provide the best experience for their people. And do reach out to me directly to discuss your challenges at work and ideas for development. If we're not already acquainted on LinkedIn, let's connect. All the links you need are in the show notes. And if you join the club, you'll be the first to hear about relevant updates and free downloadable resources that are part of developing practice and performance. Thanks for joining me today.